The intent of this afternoon is to have a discussion going. So if you had a question that we didn't leave room for questions, this is a good time to discuss it. If you want to bring related topics, this is an interactive discussion. If we can get as many people to move forward, it'll make it easier. But this is now kind of an interactive workshop. And with that, maybe we can get going with who has a question. We have some microphones on both ends. Ratib, is there somebody who might be able to pass the microphones around? No? Just go and walk to it? Okay, so if you have a question, if you can walk either to the microphone on this side or that side, we would be good.
First, I would like to thank all the speakers, and I regret that I missed Hashim's speech, but I still would like to ask a question directed first to him and then to you, Jad. Hashim, have you calculated roughly how much are the banks suffering losses as a result of the Israeli occupation and the restriction on movement of cash, especially to Gaza, and the other restrictions which are imposed on you? For you, Jad, I have the following thing. I would really appreciate if you can expand, not for for today, but perhaps for later, to look at the grades that you gave regarding Palestine and try to compare them with Israel. Israel is in the same area. The prices are higher, the costs are higher. The living environment are higher. So when I tried to compare and put a mark for Israel, I didn't see too much difference. The only difference, perhaps, is the enabling environment. And here comes the role of the expatriates, the Palestinian expatriates, who could become owners of certain companies through joint ventures with the Palestinians, and this might be the way out, because most of the Israeli companies have branches here or vice versa. Could this be an institutional arrangement that would solve this discrepancy against the Palestinians?
Yeah.
Actually, Dr. Jad, I covered your report in my presentation. Just so you know, we promoted you in my discussion. But I think that report should be maybe distributed to the members that attended the conference. The report I mentioned, which Arij contributed in association with also the Ministry of National Economy, I think, Palestinian Authority, which referred to approximately $7 billion of losses to the private sector due to the Israeli occupation. The report covers all the sectors of the economy, and these losses are mostly associated with restrictions that Israel puts on those different sectors in terms of the kind of raw materials they can import, export, the kind of permits for be it materials or people, human resources, and then restrictions on importing, exporting, and also just the additional cost and complexity of moving stuff around the West Bank and Gaza, and the very complex method of this back-to-back shipping when you have to export any goods. It typically takes maybe 3 times as long and costs at least 2 or 3 times more to export a particular item out of Palestine than any other, than if we didn't have all these restrictions. Now, your question regarding the Palestinian banking sector, I don't think a study has been done on the total losses to the whole banking sector. I think there are going to be direct losses and indirect losses to the banking sector, because imagine imagine the banking sector, what the banking sector could do in terms of more financing of projects, more loans in the economy, if these businesses themselves in those sectors that are losing the $7 billion, if those businesses had more capacity to work efficiently and make more money and expand, then those same businesses are my clients and clients of the banks, and then they could in turn get more loans and want to expand their business and take financing from banks. So there are losses to the banking sector as a result of all of those underlying losses in the private sector. Then directly the constraints on the Palestinian banks in terms of moving physical cash from A to B. These are, yes, there are some losses there because Israel basically only allows the Palestinian Authority to use the Israeli shekel as the main currency. We're not allowed to have our own currency yet. That's part of the Oslo Accords and the Paris Protocol, which is the economic agreements between Israel and Palestine, and so we're obliged to handle shekels on a let's say a day-to-day basis trading, but unfortunately we have restrictions from the Israeli side on moving that cash from West Bank and Gaza to and from Israel to the central bank in Israel, and that can sometimes cause inefficient operation in the banks themselves, whereby sometimes we can have a surplus in cash, which is inefficient because then that surplus could have been invested in a time deposit bearing interest, or if there is a shortage in the banks, then that can pose a risk or a constraint in branches where they have a shortage in physical Israeli shekel cash sometimes within the branches. So yes, it's a challenge operating in this environment, but we're used to it, just like all sectors of the economy, and we build capacity and like buffers in our operation to allow for these restrictions, just like telecom companies do, just like a bottling factory does, like all the different businesses that operate in the West Bank and Gaza in Palestine. They put extra contingency factors, extra reserves. For example, we're probably the only bank in the world that has its own petrol, diesel fuel reserve in a petrol station. Literally, we have blocked a full petrol station with a reserve of diesel fuel for our purposes in Gaza, because Gaza has at least 8 to 10 hours of power cuts a day, and so therefore when you operate operations with branches with computers and air conditioning and we like to maintain a sort of normal banking service like you have in your banks here in the US, where you go into a branch and it looks clean and then the lights are on and the computers are all on, the ATM machines work. Well, we will not settle for anything less than that. We will also provide our people with decent, professional, quality service in Gaza, and so we pay. We make sure that each branch has its own diesel generator, which is an additional cost, and make sure that that diesel generator has fuel that allows it to operate on a business as usual basis.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I want to answer is it related to this or?
It's a slightly different question.
Okay, let me answer that. But if any comments about this, let's kind of, okay. I think you asked two questions, really. One is about Israel, one about what we can do here. I mean, first of all, the one about Israel to start with, Israel is not on an equal playing field with anybody in the U.S. So to think that anything that happens with Israel is necessarily looked at, worked through the same they look at any other country in the U.S. That's not true. So there is the emotional connection, and there are political, whatever pressure where Israel is dealt with differently, right? And not to get into politics, the people in the Middle East, when they always wonder how come the U.S. never changes policy, when you live in this country and you recognize how the Jewish lobby works, from the grounds up through the political system, you understand it. And we're not going to get into politics. So what I've seen regarding Israel, I have not seen, your typical offshoring. They don't come up as as a country where you look to get your, just a straightforward call center or development. If you're into SAP or Oracle or things like that, they don't pop up as a country where you go to. Where they are very strong is in R&D. And if you look at all the big names, Intel has one of its most prized research centers in Israel. IBM in Haifa has one of its most prized research centers in Israel. And then on top of, so you see them more into the R&D side, but on top of that, there are some Israeli companies who are present in the U.S. and they go and compete, and they're pretty aggressive, if you happen to be working in their space. And what I mean by being aggressive is they have their presence here. Amdoc is probably the most prominent that we come across. Amdoc, AMDOC. That's a company. Anybody recognizes the name Amdoc? Yeah. And I worked with Amdoc on a deal. We ended up not winning the business, but I got to experience their style. So they have strong U.S. presence here. And when people look at competition and they mention Amdoc, they don't even know where Amdoc comes from. But once they see a deal happening, they fly a lot of executives from Israel, and they engage directly. And you never know what is their final pricing till the deal is done. There's the typical wheeling and dealing, and we in the Middle East have a fair amount of wheeling and dealing, it's cultural. But they bring their wheeling and dealing to the business environment as well. So it doesn't take much, the minute they sense a deal, they fly top-level executives. But they're present here, so they establish themselves as a viable player in their own niche space. And, they're a good-sized company now. I mean, their space, they're considered to be dominant. So we see them more into the R&D space, or if they have a product to sell, that they come and sell it here. So that's kind of the view there. Of the things that I listed, people in the U.S. don't view them as risk. It doesn't matter that the political environment that we are challenged by is equally challenging to them. I mean, again, there's a tiny country surrounded by people who don't really kind of like them much, right? But that doesn't matter, because they know anything you do in Israel will get protected. So regarding cost, probably they have the. I mean, I'm not as familiar, if we try to do the same offshoring work regarding cost, but companies doing there, they may get subsidies somewhere else. So they're kind of an interesting kind of competitor. Now, regarding having people in the diaspora kind of join forces, I think the answer is that's kind of key. I think that's one way you can get the presence happening here. I know Ratib, and I wouldn't mind Ratib coming. He's been sitting all day. We need him to stand up and do something here. You've been too comfortable all day. But, I mean, I wouldn't mind. I mean, here's kind of my observation. I mean, we've got a good group of people. What I think and I know Ratib, has been working hard. This is what, the 14th year you do this conference? I know you've been doing the business aspect 3-4 years. It hasn't started that way. It'll be nice if we had more participation of people who are in a position, more people who have, companies here, interested in establishing companies. I think people who can, financing is one part, right? So they can bring financing, but I think you also need to not just offer money, You want to be able to offer money and expertise so that you establish yourself. And maybe part of, if you're here, kind of from a funding point of view, maybe you grow existing companies here where you're able to tap into what's, happening back in Palestine. I mean, to me, in not knowing how everybody operates, maybe there's room for prime sub. Maybe there's a prime here, a sub, back in Palestine, where we're using the capacity in Palestine. You can try to set up the entity. We were talking about that over lunch. Is you need to establish certain credibility, and maybe credibility comes in. You start working through existing companies, or if you want to establish, from the grounds up, it's a bigger investment, but you need to bring in some expertise. You need to tap into citations, so that you need to kind of show where you've been doing it. But I think part of the disappointment is we don't get enough of the people that I think could make a difference in these sessions. But Ratib, maybe you can, you know more than I do. You're doing this day in, day out. How can we bring, people who can make a difference to these conversations, more of them? Question to you, Ratib. Yes. Close to the microphone here.
Because you noticed this morning that they forgot about me to speak. How can I bring people? The thing here is that we cannot do it by ourselves. Cannot do it is just, here we are doing this, just do it and we'll try to come. How we can get to the people who can make the decisions? I look at it from two parts. One are the churches who are investing because we are monitoring the issue of divestment and the positive investment. And these two things is going in the United States. How can the churches help in making investments in Palestine? Because we never hear at HCEF as organization, or most of the Palestinians who are looking for peace saying, we want divestment. What we want is to be equally treated as the Israelis. Invest in Palestine and do as you do with Israelis. As you said, the Jewish lobby is strong here, then let them be strong. But, for justice, you should invest in Palestine, not because of the money, because of bringing prosperity and creating jobs. And this is where one thing is the churches has to move forward toward that for peace. Second, the diaspora are watching us and they are talking about it, but through my trips in South America and United States, different states, they all want to do something, but we don't have some products really to offer them except from year to year. How we can these products to be offered all year around? As you mentioned this morning, the Palestinian companies have to have a presence here in the United States in order to, to attract these people. Now, how we can have a council of business, of Palestinian businesses over here on all levels. Yes, we tried several attempts to have a chamber of commerce and something like that. No, it needs involvement of the Palestinian business people in Palestine and Palestinian here to take that lead. And we have a lot of friends in the United States. We have American friends that would like to help. HCEF, the success of HCEF because wasn't when I started this organization to let me leave my business and be full time on this. It was the idea is just to help, but find out the Americans, they want something to do in Palestine. They want a mechanism where they can feel good about investing in Palestine or helping the Palestinian or do something with the Palestinians and change their image. And this is where now coming to this level of business, how Americans, Palestinian Americans and Palestinians get together and start thinking strategically how we can start, how we can build this conference, not till next year we meet again, how we can build on what we are building for the last 3 years. I think we built something, it is tangible. Palestinians, they heard about it, but I need the help here from asking the Palestinian business people and more of them to come together, not as individuals, just that. And here, I ask the churches to come and and extend hand to us, because you're going to make money for sure if you deal with a Palestinian, because the question was asked what the banks lost money. I don't think lost money. Why I'm making money in my investments in the Bank of Palestine? That means they are making money too. Maybe the authority is bankrupt, but the businesses are going forward. If we keep pumping that means we would have job creation, prosperity, then bring peace. Palestine doesn't need a lot. We have 22% of the historic Palestine, which is good, at least if we have this. We have 3-4 million people. How much we need? We don't need much. But let's put our heads together, and this is where we start looking for
Let me ask a question. Let me just, before we follow up on what Ratib said, Hassan, if you maybe kind of direct that at you. I mean, you had PETA, right? When you get business from outside of Palestine, what's the source of the deals? How do you get those? How do they flow? What's typically kind of generating that business, whether it's much or not?
Well, first of all, we have to identify, how can you make business transaction with the U.S.? If you want to make it based on a pure business transaction, then the church or whatsoever is not the right place to do, because there is the sympathy. But for business, when it gets to business, it's a business deal. That delivery is, the main objective or the main address for this. Well, let me try to elaborate more in what Ratib said. Ratib said that we have this conference this year. We cannot wait till the next year to have another conference, which is true, because what we have is only an activity, Ratib. This activity will not, I'm telling you, will not end up with a full program. You need to have a full program all from today till next year, that you do these activities to achieve your objective, which is having a real business shipped from US, regardless if it is outsourcing or offshoring or whatever you've called it. You need to have not a local presence based on Palestinian companies that come and say, here are our products. As a matter of fact, our products, most of them created based on our needs. So in order to say, I can sell my products here, I have to identify the needs of this market. And we, as Palestinian company, are not the expert in identifying the needs of this market. So first of all, in order not to go to the chicken and the egg and all this, I think we should capitalize on the sympathy, first of all, of the people here, that they understand the business later on. The sympathy in identifying their needs and their willingness to cooperate with Palestinian companies. But if it is a pure business transaction, I'm telling you, it's going to be difficult. So if we capitalize in their sympathy and understanding of the business, then it's the first step, to have the piloting, which we call it, the first 3, 4, 5 business transactions. If we manage to do these things, I think later on, the IT companies in Palestine and the IT companies here could work together more. Another factor, you've said it, we have 3 million Palestinians, 4 million Palestinians. How many of them are working in IT? 2,000, 5,000, whatever, one outsourcing company in US could employ at least 50% of them. So we are not talking about, a mass, And even employing the people, in my opinion, is not our target only. Our target as Palestinians to have real impact in our economy, we need what's called joint venture. Joint venture that the American companies could identify, and this is what you've said, Jad, cost. Am I right? In order to cut costs for developing a product, they should do what's called joint venture, instead of sending the work to India or any other place, they could come and say, hey, I want to invest in 20 graduates, 20 fresh, beginner. I want to invest in 20 of them to develop such a product that I could sell in US. Not a product that developed in Palestine and you want to sell it in US. So believe me, it's not difficult. The difficult part of it is understanding the mentality of the sympathy people that willing to cooperate. So the message, to the churches, to anyone who is interested, Palestinian or non-Palestinian, to help, is to capitalize on his needs, on his business, and to push forward with him. You don't have to convince the people, by the way, all over the world that we as Palestinians are educated. This is a well-known, we are educated, and this is what Mr. Clinton answered, the guy who said, we are out of, culture, out of everything. He told them, I have never ever seen a Palestinian outside Palestine not successful. That was his statement. Am I right? So, we don't have to prove sometimes you need to prove the concept, but here it's well understood. To make the story short, we have to have a committee, advisory board with this guy, focus group that set objectives. Next year, we want to achieve, if I may say this, next year, what I'm coming to tell the audience and anyone who is interested in having HCEF successful, my suggestion is to have a focus group, set objective, 1 or 2, 3 objectives. One of them for the ICT is to have a focus group voluntarily that understand the business, because Ratib is not the Superman. He could understand the banking and the ICT and the tourism, and tomorrow I don't know what other sectors he will add to his plate. It will not work. So we need the focus advisory board or committee or whatever to take the ICT part as an objective for them. And we as a Palestinian having companies here, you could see at least Ghassan is managing one of the best and largest call center in the whole Middle East, actually. It's successful. So he could be part of this committee. I'm willing to be part of this committee, and we have others willing to be part of this committee and travel all over US. But identifying the people who to meet is not our homework. It's your homework. And we are ready to take it from there. Thank you.
Yeah, Jen. First, I want to thank you all for being here and for Ratib actually to put all this setting for us to discuss a very important topic we are all interested in. And allow me just to try to emphasize and try to connect 2 crucial points made by Hassan and by Jad. Hassan mentioned about how you can actually develop product in Palestine to be actually sold in the United States. And I agree with you, it's kind of impossible. Like, I give credit to Hisham, like Hisham has a group of developers where they are developing for their bank actually a software for all these. You describe the details. It's a very intelligent, very smart work, but I don't see this product can be sold out of Palestine because it's customized. It's built from scratch to fulfill the needs of the Palestinian there. So then, Jad, you talked about research and development, which is very crucial. We are a very limited market and small market, and without being smart about how we can differentiate this market and make it sellable by not just using normal outsourcing. If somebody want to develop a piece of development or a piece of software, okay, we have this group, that's not going to work. So we need to differentiate our work by actually focusing in the research and development and try to target the market outside of Palestine, and especially in the United States. But trying to get these smart people to develop product and to solve a product for the United States is not going to work. And I always remember, all Ghassan Kanafani, when they asked him, he was a teacher at a refugee camp, and he asked them to draw an apple and a banana. And these kids in the refugee camp, they couldn't draw a banana or an apple because they have never seen an apple and banana in this world. And I always remember that. So you're asking these smart, intelligent people to solve a problem that have never been exposed to those problems. They never heard about it. And that's actually the role of the diaspora here and such a conference here in the United States. We should be the ears, the eyes, whatever, and we can smell and touch, and we know the market. And we have the credibility, and we know, like, a bunch of us work in this field, and there's a lot of success story. But this success story, they have to connect together and to be, as I said, work as the ear and the mouth, and get those people exposed, identify the problem, instead of telling, be pioneer, bring new idea. How? From where they're gonna get it? So you need to expose them to the market here through the diaspora here. And I agree 100%, research and development is a very crucial point for us to differentiate the IT sector in Palestine. And there are some initiative that has been working, and it's working, and it's not impossible. But I want to sorry, I took a lot of your time, guys. But I think it's very, very important to build the network here in the United States. We need a bunch of these ears and eyes and whatever. And it's not a charity. We're not asking anybody for a charity. We are asking because we're going to develop, at the end, doing business with you. We're going to develop, yes, it doesn't have to be venture capital. It's not my point. But it could be. But my point is you need to build a network where all the people and the corporation of people who want to help Palestine, they can grow their business, and at the same time they can help the Palestinian also ensure in this field. And that's my 2 cents.
Before you sit, could I make a request? When someone asks a question, could you just identify yourself and just tell, so we understand your perspective? I understand.
I can say. My name is Jihan Andoni. Actually, I am the CEO of an IT company here in the United States, where we tried in the last couple of years different approaches to outsource to Palestine. And one of them, actually, I was talking with Jan during lunch. We have a research and development center that in Beit Sahun in specific, which is next to Bethlehem. This research center have been developed actually 20 products or accelerator tools, we call them. It was investment from our side for a while. We couldn't market most of those, but in the last 3-4 years, actually 3-4 months, we start selling products that have been developed in Beit Sahur to Boeing, to Schneider Hospital, to big names, to the IRS. We are doing business with the government, where actually the government know that this tool have been developed in Palestine. We differentiate ourselves to a degree that they need this tool, so they don't care where actually it has been developed. We tried, and there is, in the way we see it, there is different level to reach the point of research and development. The first one is the exposure. So even if it's like you start with staff augmentation for people here, serve customer, and I know like Ratib in this field and the church or anybody want to help the IT sector can do it. If you can identify any small job that can be outshore, instead of sending it to India, send it to the Palestinian people. They can start doing that. They get at least exposed to the culture, to the language, to the problem, issues. Then I'm sure it will reach the several points. But that's, I don't want to go take more than time.
Let's
That's
take
simple.
2 more comments and then switch to other questions. So I know, Abir, you've been... Okay.
He was before.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yep.
I thought you wanted to finish that.
Yeah.
I'll walk over here if you can't hear me. I'm Kurt Barnes. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Episcopal Church. I will, and the question really is about the Palestinian stock market. As religious investors, we are likely to take the first steps as passive investors and not direct investors. And what that means typically is investing in stocks and liquid assets, liquid investments of whatever area. The question that I have is related to the size of the Palestinian stock market and whether the stock market is in any indexes yet, like the emerging market, like the Morgan Stanley Capital World Index or the Emerging Market Index. It's that sort of thing that I think that church investors, passive investors, will look to as their first toe in the water in various areas. Related to that is, and if it's not in the emerging markets index yet, can foreign investors invest in the Palestinian stock market? And I think I had probably one more. I think that's it. But my basic point is that I think churches are likely not to, while churches will invest in venture capital funds, and that's an opportunity, or that's a possibility, the initial steps are likely to be in the broader liquid markets.
Shall I take a stab at that? Thank you for the question. There is a stock exchange in Palestine. It's called the Palestine Exchange, and it was established in 1996 when it started. Currently, there are about 45 or so listed companies. 48, as San just mentioned, because literally every couple of months there's a new IPO on the market. It's considered a new frontier market. It's not your traditional brick emerging market stock exchange. There are absolutely no restrictions on any foreign investment into the stock market. Fund flows in and out through the banking sector are completely unrestricted as well. HSBC is typically the largest global custodian for stocks that institutional investors buy on the Palestine Stock Exchange. Because typically institutional investors and funds and investment funds, mutual funds, they look for a global custodian to work through. They tend to not just open accounts directly with a brokerage and a local broker and buy and sell through a local broker. So we have over the years attracted a lot of foreign investment. maybe not as much as we would like to, because the reason you mentioned, it is yet to be part of an index, the Morgan Stanley or one of these emerging market indices. But we've applied, and soon we hope that it will be put into one of these indices. The total market capitalization of these 48 companies listed on the exchange is almost $3 billion. And the daily average trading, I think, is around $1 million a day. That's currently while liquidity and markets seem to be a little bit on the depressed side with all the things going on in the region and in Europe with the European crisis and so on. But going back 3 or 4 years, daily volume trading was double, if not triple that. And then some of the good years, it was maybe $10 million a day of trading. Now, Bank of Palestine is the second largest company listed on the stock exchange, and we make up about 15 to 16% of the market cap. Paltel Group make up, I think, 35% of the total market capitalization, and has a I don't know what the daily volume trading is, but between Paltel and Bank of Palestine, these are the two very liquid stocks. What was the other question you had? So index, restriction on investment. Just as an example, take our stock as an example. In we listed our stock in 2005. Our company, Bank of Palestine, and from then, about 10% of the stock was foreign owned through foreign individuals or institutions and funds. Today, it's about almost 30%, 25-30% foreign institutions and individuals owned, which just shows the amount of foreign investment that's come into the exchange. And a number of them are these new frontier fund managers. One of them I can mention, Blakeney Asset Management, that's based out of the UK, London. They manage, I think, about $5 billion for institutional investors, pension funds, endowment funds, like Yale University is one of their clients as an example. But these are the kind of new frontier managers that have been invested in Palestine. They also invested in Paltel and have been for about 5 years or so. It's a place that's open, it's an exchange that's open for investment, has been also very, let's say, off the radar screen from the global exchanges, and is not linked or correlated to what's going on in the outside world, which is exactly what some fund managers look for, like a non-correlated investment. So when, for example, in 2007 and 2008, where after the Lehman Brothers crisis and the global markets all tanked, actually the Palestine exchange was relatively unscathed and performed relatively well in those tough years. So it's been a good place to invest. The companies, I think, last year dividends were about $150 million of cash dividends. from this 3 billion market cap. So yields are about 6%, I think, 7%. I hope I covered.
Yeah.
But actually, one point about venture capital. You're right that most church endowments would look for an entry point, an easy entry point, and the easiest would be a very liquid, straightforward investment, passive investment into equity of these listed companies like Paltel, Padico, Bank of Palestine, and so on. And there have been some funds that have invested in that. There have also been established a few mutual funds, managed mutual funds that invest in Palestine. One out of Dubai called Rasmala Investment, which is about a $40 million mutual fund that invests in the blue chip, I think 5 or 6 companies. So this is a professionally managed fund that we have, good relations with. We've also invested in, and this is an equity fund. Then on the other side, there's the private equity funds, not venture, but existing family-run businesses, medium-sized businesses. That there's a fund also out of Dubai, managed by Abraj Capital, which they actually set up offices in Ramallah, and they invest in mid-sized companies through private equity. Again, this is not venture capital. There's also been a new development starting last year where the first corporate bonds were issued. So you could participate through companies that are raising funds through bond issuing. And typically yields are around 5 to 5.5%. There were 2 corporate bonds issued last year. So it gives you an idea of, it's an emerging market, new, non-correlated with the global markets, and there are 3 ways of investing through either traditional equity, private equity, or bonds.
Okay, thank you. Amir.
Actually have two questions to Mr. Daniel. One, we can go over it very quickly because I think it was mentioned a little bit with Jihan and then the mentioning of Israel. Through your presentation, you did the comparison with outsourcing destination, and apparently for the last few years we've been selling Palestine as an outsourcing destination. Why can't it be the Israel model? Why can't it be an innovation destination? And then focusing on niche areas like Israel does, build up the expertise there and then sell it to the world. You already sell something different, something new, something unique, and then you change the image of Palestine. That's just one idea we've been working on, or we're starting working on through our new strategy at PETA. And the other question is, we have just launched a new project to build a network of support for the ICT sector in Palestine, focusing especially on Palestinian diaspora / Arab diaspora and other that are non-Palestinian or non-Arab that could want to help, that could bring help. The idea is to build experts groups across the different pillars of our strategy, which is of course targeting the development of the sector. One is policy issues. Second one is branding and building the image. The third one is enterprise development, and of course part of it is creating business linkages, and the last one, building on the human capital. Now, my question to you as a diaspora, what I would love to get your insights, how to engage and can we get the commitment of the diaspora? At this stage, we're not talking about investment. We really want to build trusts and to institutionalize this relationships with the diaspora. So what can we do to make it successful and to get the commitment of people that can do the knowledge transfer, the image building, help us get business to our industry in Palestine?
Yeah. So I'll take a cut, and I'm sure there's a lot of good opinion, that we can add to this. So to the first question about can we move into more the R&D, which is what I mentioned is what Israel is known for, the answer is absolutely yes, you can do that. There's no reason why that cannot be a capability that could be packaged and marketed. And you can also argue, if you're building a product or doing, R&D, when you look at the risk that people associate with Palestine, right, which it's real. I mean, the politics, especially in this country, will always emphasize the risk because it's convenient. How real it is, who knows, it's convenient. But in my experience, if you have an R&D or if you're developing a product, maybe more towards the product, when clients buy the product, they always get nervous about what happens to the source code, what happens to the support of that product. But here's how I dealt with it in my experience. You agree to put copies of the source code at a location that is acceptable to the client. So I've done it in the past where we've gone into looking to develop, or we're looking to use product, and you get nervous about the stability of the company or the stability of where it's coming from. A very easy way to say, look, we'll put source code and we will put a mechanism to keep it up to date. And in the case of national, disaster, or the case of a company going under, you have the right to access the source code. Now, what's critical to making that happen is what I was talking about is this is what gets negotiated under a legal entity that's here in the U.S. People will not negotiate an arrangement like that under, a separate law. People get very nervous about it, or very difficult about agreeing, what law will govern such an agreement. But so the answer to that question is yes. If you ask me, you remove one of the difficulties that gets associated with, working with Palestinian resources, because you have a convenient, easy way to deal with it. And I think you can just, handle that. So the other question about the diaspora, I think the way to go about that is it's not one group only. You need to break it into what you can get out of it. Okay, to lump it together, now you make this blob that you cannot figure out how to go about it. To me, they're kind of segments that you need to kind of look at what those segments, take the best that each segment can produce, and then collectively get what you want out of it. And so if you look at the segments, so you get, let me start with myself, right? So, I am somebody who has expertise in the marketplace, right? So I work for a large employer, I don't go and influence what IBM does. I mean, you can mention it, but this is, a giant, right? But I can bring a lot of help, through my expertise. I can volunteer my time. And I want to go back to what Hassan said. So we throw things around. I think at the end of the day, we need to try to tie them up into something that we can build on. But you get somebody like me, I'm happy to give you my time, my expertise for free, right? I mean, although it was a short presentation, I didn't cut and paste it from something else. This was from the grounds up for this conversation. So that's one group. Another group are people who have their own businesses, right? And they are looking for the expertise, and then you can pull them into, well, you can satisfy your needs, through, kind of the Palestinian capability. Another group would be people who have their own IT businesses here, and they're selling to this market or other, kind of outside of Palestine market. And you can look at how you can help them grow by expanding and accelerating their capabilities, right? So in other words, you become the fuel, you turbocharge their business, right? And then the other group that you can think of, I think some of you know Tony Habash, right? So Tony Habash, he's a CIO at a company company. He was streaming this session in the morning. Maybe he's not, because he sent me some emails, so maybe he's watching me now. But what I found interesting about him is that he's working for an employer, and he was able to influence their decision making because he's in a position where he can consume services, right? And he's respected, and he was able to influence his employer to go and use Palestinian resources. So, I mean, I could think of 4 off the top of my head. Maybe there's another 1 or 2 in addition to that. But the way to go about it is to really segment where the help would come from, and then say, okay, for each group, this is what we're looking for, and then you can start to combine it all together. I think that's how you can get the most out of it. Ratib?
Yeah, I want to comment on that too. Everybody's working on the diaspora. It's like, products, you can bring it in, These people, diaspora, they are Palestinians origin, but some of them are Americans, South Americans, Europeans. They are not the same Palestinians, it's not just when I tell them I'm Palestinian, I'm going to work with you. They need education. They need a way how we can work together. That's one thing. Second thing, been working, myself at least start 14 years on the Palestinian Christian diaspora, because this is why I am here about diaspora, and this is most of the diaspora in South America and North America, they are Christians, more than the Muslims, this is what happened. Now, when we got into the businesses and got other things, we start reaching to all Palestinians. We need to work together on that. Not the ICT decided to do projects for diaspora. Bank of Palestine has projects for diaspora. Other companies, they have the projects for diaspora. That's good, but we need to have common things to work on the diaspora, to educate them about Palestine and resell Palestine for them. I just went to South America. I went to Honduras. I went to Salvador, and I have 2 young ladies here. They just sold them Palestine, and they came to attend the conference. They were born there. Now, how these people there, they are ready to help and come to the Palestinians, but some, they have no clue. One of them said, how can I go to Palestine? It's too much, fighting, war, and all of that stuff. I said, that's true, but here in Salvador, I don't know who's my enemy, because they could kidnap you at any time. But, each one has his own culture as Palestinians in diaspora. We need to work together again. I have, no business interest myself as HCEF that, we are trying to help out. Why don't we talk about R&D? Why only R&D in ICT or in banking or whatever? Why don't do R&D into diaspora before we start anything, in order to know who they are, how we can work with them, how we can get to them? My thing here is that we don't just to get distracted about diaspora. Diaspora are good, they will come. I mean, Jad took me a long time to bring him in, But he is in, one time to bring him, he saw like what he said in the end of the day, he felt that he could contribute to Palestine. But how we can get other diaspora? We have to make it first to sell Palestine. Palestine is destination, as the tourism say, this is a destination, come and visit the Holy Land. Then everybody get benefit out of that. But that's my point here. Just let's get to that, please.
If you don't mind, I'd like to add a comment
Okay,
to.
do a second.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Thank you. Actually, I have an experience in trying to get business into Palestine and obstacles behind that. The first task, I think, it needs, the country as a whole needs profiling. It needs qualification as a country to be even, a designated destination for outsourcing. So there should be like a homework done by the government and by all these bodies that support the outsourcing business to come and rate Palestine as a destination for outsourcing. And that requires a lot of preparations, but once you're done with that, it becomes a bit easier. Having said, that's one track, and I think, I've been saying this since last year, and I think we failed to do anything on that regard, and I think it still holds, valid that we have a task to convince the government and convince, the institutions like USAID and the American government and so forth to come and rate Palestine in terms of its ability to be a destination. And that definitely will require a lot of tasks on our behalf and other tasks from the US here. That's one. Second thing, again, going back to crawling and walking and then running. I think before we aim too high, definitely, comparing the Israeli business model, and not only in IT, but also in textile, in anything that they handle, they have decided from the beginning that they want to do, they analyze the productive and value-added chain. Not even that. They looked at the value-added chain from the initiation till the end, and what they have done is they selected both ends because that adds the highest value in the whole chain. Basically, the design and development, they can gain a lot, and then the marketing, they gain a lot. But in between, they care less. That's why they used to send some of the subcontracting to Palestine, and now they're doing this for, in China and, Turkey and Jordan and elsewhere. Now, for us, before we jump, we have to, go through the steps, the proper steps. Basically, we have to get people to know that we are worthy of their business. We can do the business. So we start with small steps with the aim of doing the business development and R&D and so forth. It's just, definitely most of the jobs, I know a lot of Israeli companies, what do? They get the contract and they subcontract it to Palestinians. They do it in Palestine, then it goes back to Israel and then exported as an Israeli product. We're not even there on the map. So my whole point is, yes, definitely, a US presence might help. But also, for example, I was telling Sarah, I'm traveling after this conference to probably, hopefully, sign a deal that we've been working on. But the law came about, which law? And we said, fine, let's sign with the US law. We tried to say the British law, and they said no. We tried to say this law, and they said no, and whatever. So eventually, we said we'll accept going according to the American law in the state of, Ohio, for example. And so there are obstacles, but you have to work on solving them gradually. But the whole key point is, like Jihan was saying, exposing our people to R&D. Before you ask them to innovate, they have to see what's out there in the market. If they don't know what's out there in the market, how can you expect them to innovate? So basically, that's my point. So we have to bring them maybe small tasks, small jobs, tedious jobs, and whatever people that might consider silly and just processing. It's okay. It's a start, but it has to be direct with Palestine. That's the whole point.
Two things. One, the diaspora. What is it? The size of it. We did some studies, and it's estimated around 7-8 million Palestinians, worth about 100 to 110 billion US dollars of GDP stroke net worth. If we can tap into 1% of that, that would be amazing. If we look at examples of diaspora around the world, like the Lebanese diaspora, like the Nigerian diaspora, the Indian diaspora. These are all excellent examples that we should just learn from and copy-paste. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. There's no need to, just look at the amount of repatriation of funds back to the homeland or back to their countries, remittances, investment in real estate, investment in businesses with their family or business partners back home, or in setting up a parallel business of what business they're in the US or whatever, but another one in Palestine. These are all kind of initiatives that we're working on now. The bank, we took a decision about 3 years ago to really take a serious approach to the diaspora. We established, we're the first bank to establish a proper diaspora department in the bank with dedicated customer service staff and a manager. Salim is the head of that department. Hodali, raise your hand. And from going to places like Chile to the US to Dubai to the UK, all over the world, just to develop, first of all, relations. Like Ratib said, the first phase is awareness, getting them more comfortable with just basic facts, like, for example, the gentleman who asked the question, is there a stock exchange? Do you have, these kind of basic questions. You'd be surprised how our own Palestinian, I guess you're not a Palestinian origin, I'm taking a guess, but you'll be surprised that actually most Palestinians living abroad don't even know that there is a Palestinian stock exchange. They don't even realize that the Palestinian banking system is completely separate from the Israeli banking system. The money, if it's wired from their Citibank account or JP Morgan or HSBC, wherever they live in the world, back home, it's not going to go to Israel or via Israel or anything. It's going to go direct to their account in Palestine at a Palestinian bank. It doesn't get routed through Israel, doesn't get checked or screened through Israel, doesn't get held in Israel. And again, if you sell land or you have money that you want to send from Palestine to wherever you are, it's done instantly through the international network called SWIFT. We're members, Palestine is a member of the international banking network, transfer network called SWIFT. And so these are basic things, awareness of I mentioned in my earlier comments about the fact that according to Doing Business, Palestine is the third best country in the Middle East after Saudi Arabia and Kuwait for protecting investor rights. So as a Palestinian, a lot of Palestinians living around the world, they feel like, my money's at risk in Palestine, there's no laws that protect me, or there's what are the transparency and governance and the and actually it's the best market to in terms of your investment, the regulatory environment, the authorities that oversee the kind of policy and restrictions and the requirements for companies to do disclosures and so on really offer high protection to investors. I think the road is very long. I think Abir, your original question was to Dr. Jad, is how you can, you as a diaspora Palestinian, how can we get you to do, how can we engage you? How can we, and I think it's a brilliant question. It's been our constant fight, as a bank, because, we've put a lot of money and effort and resources to diaspora. And, we're battling with that thing day in, day out. Wherever we go, seeing diaspora, be it in the US, be it in the Middle East, be it in Europe, Latin America. It's the same issues, the same concerns, the same questions. So basically, we developed an idiot's guide to diaspora. It's on the web, it's on our website. We have guidelines, we have booklets that are translated in Spanish, in English, in Arabic, about the environment, the regulatory environment, the products and services you as a diaspora can access. And everything can be done online these days, and through the internet. It's really dummy's guide, because back to Ratib's point, it literally is just basic awareness. That's the first hurdle. But 3 years of battling at this thing, we've finally now got enough momentum to really now next year we'll be opening, inshallah, offices in Santiago for the bank. Bank of Palestine's first international expansion will be in Latin America, not in the Middle East, because we have 500,000 Palestinians living there, and they are extremely active, successful. Chile is one of the best success stories in Latin America. It's the most advanced country in Latin America. And you know why? Because I don't want to blow our own trumpet, but Palestinians were involved in the early days, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They were involved in government, in all the different sectors, be it banking, insurance, private pensions. They were the first pioneers to actually lead the whole private pension reform and set up private pension schemes, which led to economic development. You'll find 3 or 4 of the top banks in Chile are run by Palestinian origin and majority owned and controlled by Palestinians. A lot of the sectors, be it agriculture, fishery industry, mining, textiles, they're all Palestinians. I think some 10% of the GDP is controlled by Palestinians in Chile, which is impressive. So, for us in Palestine, you would have thought the best place for us would be to open a branch or open branches in Jordan, for example, or Egypt. But to be honest with you, with the way the whole neighborhood looks in the Middle East, I think markets like Latin America are much more attractive. Yes. Chile, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Peru. So with our first expansion in somewhere like Santiago, to have a hub there for all of Latin America as a representative office, and then reach out to the diaspora all throughout Latin America from there, it makes perfect sense. So that's what we're doing. And then we'll do the same in Dubai for the Middle East in 2013, hopefully Santiago, 2014 Dubai, and really the bank is positioning itself to build bridges between Palestine and all these diaspora communities, to get them engaged with Palestine, to get them investing in Palestine, to change the dialogue from thinking that Palestine is just somewhere where you as a Palestinian, you might write a check once a year or twice a year, depending on whether you're a Muslim, it's during Eid, or if you're a Christian during Christmas or whatever that you might, or Easter, that you might think charity-wise and make a donation and so on. That is good, but it goes only so far. Changing it to a more sustainable investment approach of having diaspora engaged through investment, through maybe promoting for them to have a holiday home back in Palestine. What's stopping you having a holiday house if you go once a year, twice a year, if you go every 2 years? It doesn't matter. It's a real estate property. You can get a mortgage from the bank, very good rates. Extra special rates because of Ratib and the connection. And it's that concept, of getting the diaspora, those 7 million, 8 million around the world. If we can just get 1% of them engaged with Palestine, get them to own property, get them to set up business or invest in the markets, or just simply wire money back home and place it into the Palestinian banking sector, that will create a big boom to the Palestinian banking sector, which then will go into developing the economy and so on and so forth. Look at the Lebanese banks. During the global financial crisis, Lebanese living all around the world were wiring money back home, transferring their dollars from their US bank accounts or their European bank accounts, because those banks were basically under threat from collapse, some of them, during the 2008 and 9 crisis. During those years, so much money went back to local Lebanese banks, because they were very well capitalized, they were safe. And literally, Lebanese diaspora preferred to put their money in like a safe, they considered safer than keeping it in the US banking system or US bank. Many of these banks got bailed out by the US government then, and it stabilized. But till today, there's still billions of dollars repatriating every year back from Africa, Latin America to Lebanon. And there's nothing that can stop. Why shouldn't it be the case with Palestine as well? I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
I'm called the gentle giant, but this time I'm just going to take it. I actually have a proverb, a story, a question, and a value proposition. I'll do an Arab 2 minutes, so I might extend to 5 minutes. The proverb is actually an Arabic proverb that says, رحم الله امرئا عرف قدر نفسه. It translates into, God has mercy on those who know themselves. So that's the proverb, and then I'll tell you why I said the proverb after I tell you the story. The story is 3 years ago, or actually 4 years ago, I used to manage a software team in India, and I was going on vacation to Palestine, and then I saw that all the problems that I was facing in India could actually be solved in Palestine. And that's what I did. I was going there on vacation from Chicago. So I was young, so I started my own company. I didn't contract any company there. And what started with 2 software engineers in Palestine ended up with 15 engineers working for the same client right now in Chicago. And the reason why this happened is because there was some connection with the client in Chicago, and then it started expanding organically through the connections of that client and through the good word that came from that client to other people in the US. And that just goes to spreading the word about Palestinian businesses in the US, because really there isn't awareness there. Going back to the proverb, what we have in Palestine is a lot of talent, but a lot of entry-level talent. We don't have people with expertise, and we don't have people who are on senior level. We're starting to see them today after the Cisco experiment that Abu Muad Hassan Al-Qasim was talking about. And after a few companies moved in 2007, 2008, that's when we started producing senior level engineers today, but on a very small scale yet. So really, our knowing thyself, or knowing ourselves, we have a lot of talent, and that's all we can provide. We cannot provide R&D, with all due respect.
Just yet.
Just yet, exactly. Just yet, exactly.
The transitioning that you guys are
Yes, exactly. And to finish up the story, 6 months ago, I moved my headquarters back to Chicago, and I'm trying to penetrate the US market. So this is where the value proposition comes in. Dr. Jad gave excellent points that I wish I saw a couple years ago, because they would have helped a lot. But and I lost my point here, excuse me for a second. Yes, I moved to Chicago, thank you. And the value proposition that I had, or what we identified is the best way to penetrate the US market is one, through word of mouth. So that's the best way to go through. The second one is to be a little bit aggressive. And being a little bit aggressive is not through chasing the diaspora as much as it is identifying businesses that are willing or that have the capability of restructuring their internal processes and then send them back to Palestine. And finding these businesses and then purchasing them or making investments in them, strategic investments in them, and by that route the business back to Palestine. Because really back there we do not need the funds. We do not need the money. The money is available. What we need is the money to be routed here to buy strategic businesses, because this is the best promotion to the Palestinian to the Palestinian industry, ICT industry, and services industry in general. That leaves me with the question. The question is to Dr. Jed, and you made a great point. You said that there are two types of clients. Clients who are looking for costs or who are looking to venture into outsourcing, and clients who already have it and are trying to diversify their portfolio. And my question is about clients who are trying to diversify their portfolio. Because I was trying to chase the Accentures and the IBMs and the Xeroxes of the world, and it was very difficult to put Palestine or the Middle East on their map. So my question is, can we go after those that try to diversify their portfolios? And if yes, how can we do it?
Well, I think, let me think about this one for a second. I mean, going after, you mentioned about going after the IBM and the Accentures and the Xerox of this world. The large companies are incredibly risk averse. I mean, you want risk aversion, come to IBM, okay? I mean, they're not going to risk anything. You know, large companies focused on the stock price, the share price, what happens, you know. I think so when you look at those companies, one way to force their hand is through clients. You know, like, for example, you can get a client in the Middle East. You know, I was just saying, I made a one-day trip to Dubai, you know, literally in and out. And they talked about, you know, I mentioned also the growth in Africa. Some African countries are insisting, you want to get the business, you hire our people. Saudi Arabia, I mentioned it, are insisting on that. So the only way, not the only way, but the easiest way to get large risk-averse companies to diversify is force them. You want the business, right? So IBM has a low-cost center in Michigan, out of all places, because the state of Michigan said, you want the deal, you need to open a center for us. They have a center in Cairo, in Egypt, and it's known now for its embedded software expertise. I mean, the whole of IBM, the embedded software expertise is in Egypt. How did that center come about? The Egyptian government gave them a deal and insisted that they need to hire X number of local people in order to get the deal. And once they opened the center, that center started to pick up, and now they have worldwide expertise in a niche area of capability called embedded software. So the large companies, you know, they're an interesting animal, and you really need to force them to take risk. I mean, they just don't do it easily. I think, you know, where you might find captive audience are some of the smaller clients where they can see a more flexible approach. You know, maybe they're willing to pay a bit of a premium, maybe, but they like to be the big fish in a small pond. I mean, this is kind of where I look and say, you know, you need to look at people who cannot afford to keep everything done being in the U.S., you know, and they are looking at a way to lower the cost. And they can be dissuaded by attention and all of that into giving the business. So I personally, if, you know, I would say I wouldn't look at the big clients. I would look at the mid-tier clients who are trying to kind of lower their cost. And, you know, if you look at the U.S. market, I mean, you know, the one area that has been growing is healthcare. right? So healthcare is a big business. It's going to be a big business in the U.S. as we move forward. There are a lot of companies involved in healthcare that are not large, and you need to be careful about regulation and FDA and all. You need to be careful what you do with them and what they can, willing to do outside, and they have a lot of certification. But I would say that's a niche, that you can look at. They're smaller companies, they look at the cost. So that's kind of how I would say you can approach that. You might find, clients who have put so many of their eggs in one basket. You need to be, selective. But to go to the big companies or the big clients, they don't have an incentive unless they're being forced to kind of do that. So it's just it's a smart way of looking at it.
Daniel, let me comment on one. 1 week ago, I am a board member in other association or NGO. One of the board members, she's the president of what's called School Foundation here in US. And her boss, came to Israel less than a month ago. He didn't meet the IT people, even though he is the founder of eBay. He met Beres. Beres told him one sentence, why don't you invest in our venture capital? And his son, Polaris is the venture capital at that time. So when I talk to the Israelis, you've talked about the Israelis, they are here aggressive, etc. I also talk to them, how do you do that? Regardless, of you take it honest or not, in IT, I think there is no politics, so they are honest. All of them, at least, that I know, said, we are not selling products because it's only great products, it's Israeli products, etc. We are selling in Italy because not we are recognized as, yes, they are great, doing a great job in the ICT sector, but we are selling based on connection. When we travel to Italy, we identify with whom we are going to talk. Then it goes from there, So going back to the, to the same question that Kai said, working with Accenture, why should I work? We are small to medium, and the largest IT company is even, I don't know if it can be considered as a medium. It's in a small scale, So I think here we need to identify Palestinian or non-Palestinian willing to cut cost in their product development and do joint venture with them. I could tell you easily that many IT products here, many solutions in the US market almost obsolete. It's not, they don't think, we are in the health sector, in Dubai, and we are working with the giant of fraud insurance system that control the fraud here in US. When we looked at their system, honestly, it's you cannot compare it with what we have in terms of technology, because what they care about is the customer. So the first minute they've seen our product, they said, we want to buy the company, because they don't want to redevelop their product. They said, your product is mature enough, let's buy, we start with this. So I want to go back, yes, we have to market Palestine, first of all, as Ghassan said, we have to convince people. But till we reach that point, we have, a short-term plan. That's the long term. We have to have it. Without that, we will not survive. But for the short-term plan, in order to convince people as piloting or convincing or having successful stories, yes, we have to identify 5-10 people willing, based on their in Ratib connection and any other in the churches or wherever, on their sympathy, to take risk. Without taking risk in this area and making the successful story, it's gonna take us time, I don't wanna say 5-10 years, but at least we have to capitalize on those people and formulate this group. As Hashim said, how to make the connection with the diaspora and to convince them, yes, it's a battle. We have to do it. But at least, we have platform here, the church. We have people that in IT business. Let's identify them. We are willing to travel at any time. It's not the Israeli CEO staff or, high-rank people willing to travel. We are willing to travel and tell them we have people. Because Kai said, we don't have many senior engineers. Who said we should have all of them? We need to have 2, 3, 5 stories, successful stories. Then people should invest on the fresh graduate, the talent, because the technology these days, it's not that difficult to learn it. Within 6 months or 1 year maximum, you will get the best out of this. So just to wrap up, let's please focus on finding those people who has the sympathy and they are in the ICT business in order to make the story short with them, and they have a need, capitalize on their sympathy, address their needs, cut cost, make the trust based on entity that we create here, or bring them to Palestine once they visit. And this is what I've done with a German company. The first thing I've said, you are my guest. You should come and visit Palestine. We took them to Bethlehem. Believe me, they spent 1 hour in the company. We took them to Bethlehem, to Jerusalem, in a tour. Then they interviewed the team and said, we need 15 out of them. They took out of the 15, believe me, 12 of them fresh graduate, and they did it. So just capitalize on this.
Okay. So let's do 2 questions, and then because by the way, I stopped wearing a watch, didn't realize I'll be standing here all the time, so I need to check. Okay, 2 quick questions. It's 3:45. I know you've been standing there for a while, so.
Yeah. I don't have a question. I just want to highlight on what Sarata was saying before about that the people in Palestine have no clue. The people in Latin America, all Palestinians in Latin America have no clue about what this is happening. I am one of the 2 Palestinians, Salvadorian Palestinians Sarata was talking about. My name is Joanna Safi, and people back home, there are a lot of businesses back home, and there's a lot of power from Palestinians back home. We've even had a Palestinian president, not this term, but the term before, and his contestant was another Palestinian, and I think there's a lot of power in El Salvador. I think there's a lot of ignorance. That people don't know that they can do business with Palestinian people, even though we know that we have this affinity with Palestine. Even though we know that we are Palestinians, we're not aware of it. So I think we have to start to creating this awareness. But how? We've had people coming over and making a conference and making visits, but the response is not as positive as we wish it would have been. And why? Then again, we say why? Because they don't know that they can be benefited from it, from coming to these visits and hearing what these foundations have to say. And so I was thinking along like this conference and yesterday, what can we do? Well, from my point of view, maybe we could use the youth. We could use Palestinian a Palestinian young person just graduated from the university, coming over 6 months, we can have positions in our businesses, and the salaries we've had to discuss, but we could have that. And they stay in El Salvador working for one of these businesses or for 6 months, and they get compromised with Palestine that during those 6 months they're going to work. And if they have, our societies in Latin America are so small that if these people could do a lot of work in 6 months, and they could make these foundations and all that Palestine has to offer be known in 6 months. If they have the right jobs, if they have the right like sponsors, like people behind, the right names behind them. And about finding these positions and consider that done, I could make that happen, and we could try. And I know people back home listen to youth, and they listen to other people that come from the outside. So I think it's just about creating awareness is so important. And in Central America, there's so many Palestinians that could help or would be interested to help if they would know. And that's basically what I wanted to say.
Okay. So we've got one quick one.
Well, my name is Rafiq Masri. I'm Palestinian American. Been here for 32 years. And I have a small business that I started 18 years ago. I'm an example of a small business, successful Palestinian that's in the IT field. And I've been trying for the last year to do business in Palestine. And one of the issues that I've had was, which is something that Qais mentioned, there's a lot of education in Palestine, but expertise is the one that I'm concerned about. Because as a small business, just like every small business, we don't want to take risk. Just like a big company doesn't want to take risk, we're low risk. We want basically to deal with someone that can hit the ground running. So we don't have time really to deal with, let alone, finding somebody here is difficult. And when we hire someone here, we want them basically to fit with our, to be very close to what we're looking for, and a person that can hit the ground running. So when trying to do business with a company in Palestine, one of the issues that I have is finding the people with the specific expertise that we're looking for that can hit the ground running once we say go. So one of the question I have is, for example, in the U.S., there are various certifications that people get in order to get jobs. So, I get people with resumes, I look at the resume, I see their work experience, and when I see, for example, this person is Microsoft certified, or he's VMware certified, or what have you, it gives me a certain level of, comfort. I'm wondering, in the Palestinian territories, is there any sort of a push to promote training and certification, so that would make it easier for companies like us outside to do business, and because we'll have a certain level of comfort that this person at least went through this type of training and have a certain basis. That's my question.
Hassan will answer.
Well, Hadr. Well, the certification, let me tell you, Microsoft a few years back, noticed that in the Palestinian sector, in the whole Middle East, in Ramallah specific, they have the most certified people in the advanced. It's not only, in the entry level, MCS, EORC, they have the highest level of certification. But trust me, if you want to just say, I need people to start, senior people to start, and the senior from India end up with Somalia are expensive. You cannot get an experienced Indian less, than any American working here, So in order to make the story short, it's not a cheap labor there. I'm not talking about cheap labor. If you want to do business, you have two options there. Either you invest to harvest, which means you get 20 talented people just graduated. Their level of know-how, even though they are just graduate, is much bigger, much better than anyone graduate from here for one reason. Because they don't have many options. They have one option to succeed. So getting the certificate is a matter of few months, maximum 3 to 6 months. They will take all kind of certificates that you are looking for. The other point, which is their loyalty. Take for example the Palestinians, the Jordan Palestinians, Palestinian Jordanian or Jordanian Palestinian, which means the Palestinian in Jordan. Jordan is a school to the Gulf. After the first year or the second year, if he gets a contact in Saudi Arabia, he will leave. Inside Palestine, we don't have this problem. Even though we have the same, opportunity to travel there, we have, especially the West Bank people, they have, the Jordanian passport, but they don't do that because they are loyal, and this is another factor that you should capitalize on it. The third one, which is important, most of our schools, most of our universities have the academy, Microsoft Academy, Cisco Academy, SAP Academy these days. So we don't have lack of certificate. Dr. Ishaq was pushing me to say that even in the political level, from the president office, they recognize that they have to do something on this area, that they formulate advisory board or a committee, Higher Council for Innovation and what the other word is? Innovation and what? Well, Higher Council for Innovation, which means the president himself, we had a meeting with him 1 month ago, me and Dr. Ishaq and others, and he said, I'm willing as a president to support whatever it's needed in terms of financial to create jobs for those guys. But I don't want only jobs. I want to see products, Palestinian products, that we could sell all over to help the economy. So identifying the needs in order to create these products, believe me, it's not our homework because we don't know it. We are not exposed to the needs of the international market at large. We might, develop this product or that product, but these are, individual cases. It's not a mass. And, going back to the Israeli product, how many Israelis are working in the outsourcing business? None of them. I don't know any Israeli company in Israeli selling bodies. I don't know. So they are not building their economy based on outsourcing. They are building their economy based on products. That's why I said it's a joint venture. It's not selling people. We don't have massive people.
Okay, I think we need to wrap it up. A quick comment, because otherwise nobody's going to make it to the banquet on time, and then they'll be angry with me. So, yeah, I know there are closing remarks, but any quick comment here before we do?
Yes, one proposal and one comment. Regarding the comment is regarding the brain drain. We are very concerned as Palestinians. We are very concerned about the offering of scholarships to the United States. Let me be specific. Of the 200 people who got the Clinton scholarships, less than 50 returned back. We lost $30 billion worth because I consider that a master's degree graduate is equivalent to $200,000. We lost $30 billion of brain drain. My institute, I sent 15 people to the United States. No one returned. So I am very, I would like to advise against this. But now, I want to make a proposal. Instead of wrapping up, I think it's about time to form a Palestinian-American Business Council that will come out from this platform here, in which we'll get all the actors. We have tested several attempts from the Palestinian American Chamber of Commerce, which I think Rafiq knows about it, to HCEF, to others. I think it's about time to put our act together, form a consortium called Palestinian American Business Council that will meet, put the strategy, plan, mission, vision, and let's join. We have the investors who are ready to put money. We have the human resources. We have all that's needed. All we need is to just work together. So this is, I think, a worthwhile wrapping up for this conference today.
I think, I mean, having said that, I was going to make one final comment, take my moderator hat off, and then Ratib would wrap it up. And to go back to something you said, Hassan, I think what we need to do, and exactly you had the same idea out of this, is we need to shrink the problem. The problem at the moment is just too big for all of us. We need to shrink it by saying there are priority markets, there are priority offerings, and what are the challenges between matching the two, for example, the Palestinian government promoting itself. But if we keep it at this level of discussion, it's overwhelming to me, and maybe I'm limited here, but it's overwhelming to me. And if I'm tackling this, from a business point of view, if I'm, the job I get paid to do, step one is let's bring it to a smaller scale. And what I mean by that is, define what it is, in smaller chunks, and then assign people to go and tackle whatever assignment they have, and then we can keep it going. And you do it as a plan. I mean, like it's a project plan. Think of it as a project plan, as a rollout plan that says here's step one, and these are the things that need to be resolved. You handle that. You go to step two, and so on. Anyway, plenty of chance to talk over dinner. I think we have some more tomorrow, right? So, Ratib, if you want to wrap it up.
Yes. Thank you, Jad. Thank you, everyone. This is the end of today, and tomorrow we have another 1 hour and 15 minutes or half an hour, 1 hour and a half. Again, we can have some more discussion tomorrow, and we have more people who could involve. They are not interested only in business, interested in Palestine as a whole. And I would like myself and Hashim to say a few words, because all this business initiative, it is because of Hashim, has interest in promoting Palestine as a whole too. This is how all started, these conferences, and this is something we need everybody to involve in that. And this is not only this conference is for diaspora, which we spend a lot of time. This is for every Americans has interest in Palestine to do something about it. And I want to just have a couple of comments to that. The word sympathy is not what we need, because we don't need sympathy as Palestinians. We need solidarity with the Palestinians, because we are church goers, we are believers, and the injustice is not acceptable in our faith. And this is where the message has to go to everyone, that if really you want justice to be served, that means we have to work on justice. As we say, our faith, we have to put our faith in action. So our faith in action is to be balanced, to be good for everyone in the Holy Land. And we are the Palestinians, we need that balance. This is one of the things. The other things about diaspora, I don't want to call the solidarity where somebody said sympathy, or somebody where it has the feeling or the passion for Palestine. It is that mean you don't deal strictly business as you say, you want to deal business with Palestine. It is combination. Of that, you need to help, and at the same time, you need to invest. You do good, then you do well. And I ask all these Palestinians who are in diaspora, the 7 million Palestinians, to come forward and say, okay, you don't want to give grants, then invest. Take a risk at least. And I mean, you are going to make money. And this is where I'm saying here, just think about it in different ways. And I'm asking, the people who are from the Palestinian origin to think more. And I'm talking to everyone watching us, around the world about this conference to come forward, in order to create jobs, in order to bring prosperity to Palestine, in order to bring peace and justice to Palestine. And this is the message I would like to get out through business, and this is the business, always business people don't like to see destruction, see wars, see that, because it doesn't work. And this is where that's my appeal and my asking to everyone around, here and in the world, that let's do it, that way. Hashim, would you please, if you have any comments, to say something, on that?
Thanks, Ratib. I think you pretty much covered everything, but I mean, if there's one thing, we talked a lot about diaspora, so one thing that I think HCEF stands for is getting all the church groups also very much aware and engaged vis-a-vis the Palestine issue, and getting Palestine on the map in terms of what we need in Palestine. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done there, because I think I'm just a bit worried that the conference has been focusing a little bit, maybe too much, on Palestinian diaspora, which I mean, it's a good thing. There's a lot for us to do, but what kind of gets me is, and I'm going to speak frankly, I'm a Muslim, and I'm investing heavily in a place like Bethlehem, because I am very worried about what's going on. And the speed of the depletion of the Christian fabric. Palestine stands for Christianity and Muslims and Jews living together. This is the fabric of our Holy Land, and I just think it's an absolute crime what's happening right now, in that specifically the Christian community is just shrinking rapidly, and we as a people, as a bank, as a board, as an institution find that extremely worrying, and we've decided to put it high up on our priority list as a strategic objective, to double up and triple up effort, and be what we stand for. Bank of Palestine is for all of Palestine. It's for all of Palestinians, and all religions. And I think it's our duty as an institution, and we call on other institutions and individuals, and I think, if anything, the first institutions that need to step up is the Christian institutions, the churches. They need to also invest with us in Palestine, and invest specifically in the Christian communities, and especially, number one, somewhere like Bethlehem, and number two, Jerusalem, where there's an absolute need, where unemployment is at the highest rate in the West Bank. Bethlehem has the highest unemployment rate, especially within the youth segment, and so we took a decision as a bank to buy a big piece of land, to send a message to the Palestinian community inside and out, and build a very flagship branch, 5-6 stories, and also for the bank, and also another building beside that connected to it, to actually house some of our operations. So we're relocating some of our operations from Ramallah and Gaza to operate in this new building in Bethlehem, creating at least 50 jobs. The investment is about a $6 million investment. It's one of the biggest investments that any bank has made in Bethlehem, and I just find it and let me speak frankly, it's frustrating to see that the Christian international community, although may be active in charity, it's not really addressing a more long-term, sustainable, developmental approach to addressing the issues of unemployment and the issues of the Christian community that's slowly depleting in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And so my call, and I think I speak on behalf of the panel as well, is to the church groups and the churches who typically have endowment funds and all kinds of resources, be it technical, be it financial, be it volunteer, to actually step up to this challenge and join hands with us to invest in Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and to put a stop to this disastrous situation that we're in, and to try and reverse the trend, because we have young people leaving Bethlehem to seek opportunity abroad. We need to not only stop that from happening, but we need to then bring back those who left and give them hope and jobs. So that's just one thing I'd like to add. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.